many of you came back after lunch being in Vegas. But one of the things that we do know seriously is that this is the perfect place for us to be to have a serious conversation around where we want to see our educators be, and particularly our kids be, post-COVID. I was talking to a couple other folks who are here across the country earlier, and we were talking about sort of what's on our minds right now. And the reality is, over the last 2 years, this has been tough. Most of us forget that as educators, we're human. So as this is tough, just imagine what it has been for our students, right? And so as president of the D-Dance Group and founder and CEO of the Principals Club, we have the amazing opportunity. And we work with roughly around 450 district schools or NGOs around just educators who really want to grow leadership, who want to grow strategy. So let me be honest, I'm an optimist, right? You ever met someone and they just want to vent? They want to tell you what the problem is? That's not the type of person I am. I always tell people, if you have 10 minutes, 1 minute is the problem. 9 minutes is the solution. And every single problem that we face can be solved. Now, let me put the caveat out there, if we want to solve it. And the way we solve problems are two ways. It's through people and it's through strategy. Bottom line, if we truly want to solve the problem. And so that's what the D-Dance Group does. We recruit, we select, we provide professional development. We do not train people. We build capacity. And then from there, we absolutely work with you on what's the best strategy to accomplish the goals you have. And whether we're working with Microsoft, Capital One, whether we're working with Apple, regardless of the fact of who we're working with, we can solve problems through leadership and strategy. And so if we think about this, who is this guy on stage with this afternoon? I know over the next couple of days, we're going to meet many people, right? We're going to exchange numbers. We're going to talk about, who our friends are when we left here. And I know we are excited to just be present. The reality is we've not really been together. And so who is this guy in front of you? So on the right, those are some things that a lot of folks like to think of me as. And yes, I'm as young as I look. But I've done all those things, right? And they were exciting things. But out of all of those positions, I will tell you the best job I had was being a principal. And so that was how we founded the Principals Club. Because when I talk to principals today, what they tell me is they need coaching. They need support. And so we have principal supervisors who in many cases don't want to admit that in many cases they do not know how to provide that level of support. How can you provide support to someone when you have not experienced what they're experiencing right now? I was a principal back in 2006, and I like to think I can get along with great principals, and I know many principals, and I am not going to go into a building as if I was a principal during COVID. And so as we do this, one of the things that I like to tell people is that, yeah, I'm an author, I've written 2 books, but I'm a principal at heart. Because if we think about it, over the last 2 years, we have to remember that we have gone through personal and professional struggle, right? Raise your hand if you were impacted by COVID. Exactly, everyone in here, all right? Many of us want to raise both of our hands. And so when COVID came, this is how we thought about it. Before COVID, yeah, we did all this stuff. And then when COVID happened, what happened? Amazon just blew up. Right? Days where I literally had about 5 packages right outside. This was the vacation, literally, for the last 2 years. So this is why we're excited to be back out. But this is what I did, right? And how many of us got fur babies during COVID, right? But I took it a step further. I got 2. And not to mention this little one right here does not like this one, who's the cutest, right? And so literally both of them together, this is how we spend our days now post-COVID. So just like many of you, who you might be on a Zoom call and you might hear a baby crying or a dog barking, both of them will literally be running around the house fighting, right? Because again, remember, Ace does not like Onyx. So let's fast forward though. As educators, we are here for a reason. We're trying to figure out what do we do next, right? Yes, we come to conferences because we want to network, but the reality is we come to conferences to learn as educators. What can we do? How can we improve practice? And so we think about this work now. Many of us were thinking about how serious our effort was prior to COVID. But now we've had young people of all races, all ethnicities, who've literally not had the education that we would want even for our own kids over the last 2 years. And my heart goes out to educators. Because in many cases, educators had to put curricula together to go online. Many educators had to go out and buy units just to get basic access to students. Back in 2012, when I was a superintendent in Maryland, we put devices in the hands of kids, over 110,000 students, put devices in their hands, K through 12, right? And so people thought about, what in the world were you doing then? Then COVID hit. But that's just the part. Look at what the data speaks to us. And McKinsey and Company have done a phenomenal job highlighting educational data post-COVID and what it needs to look like for kids as we advance our work. And so whether you're looking at math, whether you're looking at reading, by race, income, or location, and we're going to get this slide. We'll make sure everyone has this presentation. But if you think about it, Black, brown kids were already behind pre-COVID. We think about this work right now, though, they're even further behind. Black and brown kids with income levels of less than 25,000, and then in cities and in suburbs. Because I have to remind people, yes, we talk a lot about inner city schools and what that looks like and the challenges they present. A lot of people don't talk about our suburban urban districts, where literally they are mirroring what are some of the issues and concerns happening in urban ed, and they are mirroring just what the statistics show, even post-COVID. So as I start to think about it, and I'm asked about this a lot, and people say, are you a futuristic? No, I'm not. I am an optimist. Remember that. And I'm a problem solver. So if you want to solve the problem, it can be solved. So we think about this next level of work, though, require leadership, bottom line. Educators know that we're going to have to step out of our box even more. District administrators, and I think I was listening on the last panel where we talked about the bureaucratic that we deal with, all the bureaucracy that principals have to deal with just to spend $5,000 of their own money, right? We're going to need leaders who think about innovation, who really think about great ideas, and who in their mind, they can say, you know what, at this point in our future, we have two paths. We can either go back into our status quo, which many people want to do, because it's comfortable. But every single quote that we learn about that's change management, that's learned about innovation, that's learned about ideas, we recognize that nothing of great value happens by dealing with the status quo. So we're going to have to stretch ourselves, and we have two paths to deal with right now. As we open back up and COVID subsides, we can either go back to what we were doing, which were, in many cases, boring kids, in many cases, telling educators what they cannot do. As I met a colleague earlier, they were telling me about technology departments saying what they could not buy. Back to basic classrooms. Or we can take the path less chosen. All right? I'm an English major, I have to admit. Robert Frost was one of my favorites. I see another English. Raise your hand, you're an English major. We're in this together. All right? Robert Frost, one of my best poets, The Road Not Taken. Right? That's what we as educators have to do right now, but we have to do this. And I'm not going to take long to say it, though. We're going to have to do it stretching ourselves out of this box, I talked to super coach about 17 of them across the country. We're talking with 2 more right now. We just worked with a search firm who literally placed 3 more, and we're going to be serving as coaches for 2 of those 3. So I talk with superintendents all the time. And yeah, we talk about the politics, the bureaucracy, all that stuff. And truth be told, no superintendent has ever lost his or her job based on academic achievement. It's been politics, communication, things like that. But some of the best leaders are leaders who are innovative. They realize that ideas drive the work they do. Implementation drives it even better than having the idea. But as I think about this, and I've had people ask me, what do you see post-COVID? And I tell them these basic 7 things, and we're going to talk about them. But the first one, got to have a comprehensive definition, not just of schools, but really of schooling. If something was not right for people before, why would we go back to the same thing after? Doesn't make sense, right? We have classrooms that we would not even put our own children in, but yet we subject other students to being in those classrooms. So we have to have a definition of educators. What I realize is educators really do like vocabulary, right? My English major friend and I, we love vocabulary. I always like to watch my words, right? So we need definitions. The second thing is we've got to have an unrelenting, and I'm going to go back, I'm sorry about that one. We got to have an unrelenting focus on equity. And I know as politicized as education has gotten, not just in the US, but across the globe, there are certain words that can't be used. Let me be clear. Folks ask me, what is equity? It is making sure that every kid has the appropriate supports where they can be successful based on what they want to do, not the pathway we're taking them down. Kind of simple. Doesn't have anything to do with black, with white, Hispanic, Latino, Latina, Latinx. Doesn't have to do anything to do with that. But we can talk about our educational outcomes and what has happened and why those groups have disproportionately been marginalized because of decisions we made. But when we focus on equity, we focus on making decisions if our own kid was impacted. And that's a whole different standard. The other thing that we have to do is we have to have a robust analysis of relevant and inclusive curricula. If we go into classrooms today, literally the classroom looks exactly how it looked when we were in school. And yes, I'm as young as I look. But it looks the same way as my mother and grandmother did when they were in school. Kids are learning the exact same thing. And then business owners or corporations or individuals or even universities, they'll say to us, well, kids aren't prepared. And we need to have a conversation about what is it that kids need to be learning in our classrooms. I dare ask the question, does every kid need to take Algebra 2 to graduate? Right? I don't understand. I mean, let me be clear. I think I was okay at math. I'm working with a 12-year-old now who I am really struggling at times to support. But I probably could not remember how to do a quadratic equation. And in the work that I do right now, I don't do it. Right? We also have to have an intentional focus on pedagogy. Right? We focus on the what we teach. We also got to focus on the how we teach. And so that's why I'm excited. I'm not excited we had COVID. Let me be clear. Right? Anyone being killed by any pandemic is not good. But what it has done for education, it's forced us to think outside of our box. Right? I remember being a superintendent and people telling me, why are we doing this? Why are we giving kids computers? I learned from a textbook. Why can't they? I know all of us have heard that. When COVID hit, people were struggling to get the units because they were so expensive. But what it's done now is it's allowed us to say, we can focus on what we teach, but let's put real emphasis on how we teach. Does a teacher have to come into a classroom every single day and do whole group instruction? I think we all know the answer to that. If a kid needs information, does a kid really need to come into a building to learn that? I think we already know the answer to that. So if kids have access to anything we want them to know, and in many cases things we don't want them to know, how does that transform the work that we do as educators and as teachers? A mindful approach to human support. And we talked about this earlier on, but the reality is this. When we think about this, because we have struggled personally over the last 2 years, as adults, there are adults who are dealing with mental and emotional wellness issues as we speak. There are some of us probably in this room right now who are dealing with personal struggles of our own. And yet we are expected to forget that, go into our offices or in our buildings or wherever we go for work, and we're expected to act as if nothing is wrong with us. Now, as adults, some of us get that right. Most of us get that wrong. And most of us struggle depending on the day. Now, imagine a 5-year-old. Dare I say, imagine a 17-year-old. And imagine the kid who's in middle school, who's transitioned to 6th grade. But literally, they were transitioning during COVID, but now they're in 8th grade. So there's so many things we need to do in terms of human support that really focuses on mental health and wellness, not just for students, but also for our employees. We also have to have a commitment to multifaceted advocacy. And hey, what does that mean, Dallas? We need to stop trying to silence people when it comes to expressing what they feel needs to adjust with the work that we do in education. Whether it's teacher advocacy, whether it's administrator advocacy, and the advocacy I love the best if it's student advocacy. Because I always say as a superintendent, you can come after me all day long. But if I have kids on my side because I brought them along in the decision, let me see you do that. That's going to be a little tough. And last but not least, because I believe in things in 7, an innovative and fresh look at physical space. And there are schools right now and districts right now, they've gotten their federal funds, right? And they're saying, we're going to put our money in buildings. Let me be clear. There are some bad buildings that kids learn in every single day. But as we renovate these buildings and look to to rebuild and reconstruct them, we cannot go into this work with the same physical space definition that we had before. And so let's talk about this just a little bit more very quickly. A new look at schooling. So I always would hear stories from folks who would say, the school was the center of what the community did. And as a principal, I always said, I'd love to have lived in a time like that. But we can create this now. We look at our new definition of schooling. People must be at the core of that. Right? There are people who want to learn. There are people right now who need to have their capacity built. There are employers who are looking for new skills in people. Right? There are people who need social services right now. There's adult learning that needs to happen. There are kids, let me be clear with you, and I know many of you know this, that they've had happen to them even when they were in middle school, and they may not be able to work with school from the hours of 9 to 3 like we prescribed for them. So why can't we have a comprehensive look at schooling that looks at learning opportunities, social services, workforce development, job training, and health and wellness services? Now, someone would say to me, this costs a lot of money. We're already spending this money, people. But in order to spend it well, people need to be at the core of it, but let me get granular with it. Kids need to be at the core of it. Because to do this, yeah, we may have to make some uncomfortable decisions. And people may not be able to work in their silos like they want to. And people may not be able to do just what they've done in years past. Because if kids are who we're focusing on and people are at the core, schools definitely now need to be looking at how do they serve the communities in which they're in. So, second part, equity. Right? We've seen this picture before. More than likely, we've seen this picture before. I always like to add the reality in this. Because this is reality, what things are right now. We give every single kid the same thing. And so there are kids who grow more. There are kids who don't grow at all. And so, again, vocabulary is important. My English major friend. We say, let's focus on equality then. Right? So then we focus on equality. Again, we give everyone the same thing. We focus on equity. Right? And I know we want to get to justice, and I'm very optimistic that at a point in my life, we will get to justice, but this is where we spend our focus and need to. Everyone just gets the support that he or she needs to be successful in the career path that they choose and not the path that we choose for them. Race has nothing to do with this. So I always like to then point to my friend, Pedro Nogueira, professor at UCLA, and if you haven't seen this, Pedro is very big on equity, all right? Pedro talks every day, and he's consulted with us. He's done a lot of districts. Obviously, 10 ways to pursue educational excellence and equity. Really, we have to challenge the normalization of failure. Easy, but it's hard. Because just because we give a test or an assignment, and kids have done it, and we've graded it, that does not mean our work is over. Because when we do this, we have to then think about what is it that a grade really means for a student. Is it the grade we're searching for or the learning outcome that we're searching for? That's our decision as educators. Second thing, speak up for equity. And in many times in education, people make decisions for us. Has that happened to you? And in many cases, it happens because we don't speak up. So if we speak up for it, it lets people know that we're important, that our conversation around that matters, and that our voice needs to be at the table when they're making policy decisions. We talk about the embracing of immigrant students and their culture, and I love when I go into schools, and you see the diversity that unites us as a country and as a world. And that needs to be celebrated. We think about also the work that we provide students clear guidance on what it takes to succeed with our school counselors, and we build partnerships. And I'm not talking about the partnerships that are easy and that's familiar to us. You know, we go to the YMCA. That's not the type of partnerships I'm talking about. I'm talking about the partnerships that are going to be out in the community that's going to get the students and families that we need the most, because we know that in order to really reach them, we've got to go to them. That looks at our work differently, but I'm going to tell you something. What I found out as a principal and as a superintendent, that if we do that work up front, it makes our work a lot easier on the back end. No one is going to connect with you if they don't know that you care about them. The other thing we have to do, again, align disciplinary practices. We're not even going to go into that today. That's a whole different 3-hour session. Rethink our remediation and focus on acceleration. This is coming up a lot now, obviously. Post-COVID, we want to think about what is it that we want students to know and be able to do. We want to offer tutoring services and ways to remediate. But I always remind people, many times remediation decisions are made based on wrong data. And what kids are really yearning for is to be accelerated. Right? You ever think about the kid who's bored in class, you're wondering why they're not talking, or in many cases, why they can't stop talking. In many cases, that kid is bored. Right? I was that kid. So then we want to think about the implementation of evidence-based practices for effectiveness, and that was a whole different session. Build our partnerships with community to address student needs, and really teach kids the way that they learn, not the way that we think they should learn. Let's keep going. What are they learning right now? So In order to compete globally, and I remember as a superintendent, I work with our partner districts and schools now, and I'll talk about in order for our students to really be successful, they have to be globally competitive citizens. So they're not competing against students from, and I was in Maryland, we're not competing against students from North Carolina or New York or Illinois or even California. We're competing against students globally. So in order for that to happen, our curricula must match this. But most of our curricula, literally, what we do, and this has been happening since, again, all of us were in school, we take 3 years' worth of content, and we put it all in 1 year. Not thinking about the snow days, not thinking about the assemblies, not thinking about when students are absent, not thinking about when teachers are absent, because we can't find subs right now. And we wonder why kids can't relate to it. Why, when you ask a kid what they learn, they'll show you this face like, One of the best parts of my job as a superintendent and as a principal too was to attend graduation. And I would ask kids, tell me what you remember. Tell me what you just loved about. You know, they never told me they loved Algebra 1 or they loved, chemistry or they loved English 6. They didn't talk about a subject. But yet we teach in silos based on the subject. We need to be asking ourselves, if a student were to be in 6th grade, what should the 6th grade experience be? What is it that students need to know and be able to do as a 6th grader to be prepared for life? Not to be prepared for 7th grade, to be prepared for life. So then everything builds on each other, right? We can spiral back. We can do everything we need to do to make sure they're prepared for their life. In addition to that, though, and this is where, when I have an opportunity to talk to legislators or policymakers or state superintendents or anyone that's at the State Department level, many districts will tell you they're handcuffed with this, and they are, because the state sets much of that. And so if we really want to think about a global curriculum, we really got to be thinking about what they need to know and why they need to know it, and how does that relate to their future. Essential question is, do all students need to take the same courses in order to be prepared for their future? Bottom line. Let's keep going. Now, how are they learning? And I know many of us, again, over the past 2 years, thought differently about how we provide instruction to kids. And so we can talk, we have pros and cons about the flipped classroom, but I'm going to tell you, and having seen it done really, really well in many, many schools and districts across this country now, we can think about what we teach, or I should say how we teach it, using a flipped model. Because I'll be honest with you, if we think about this, whether your school is on a 7-period day or an 8-period day, if they're on block scheduling regardless, you do not have, more than likely, more than 90 minutes with a student every other day. By the time you get students in here, and I know we have some of the best teachers. They have their do nows, they have their bell ringers, they have their guided practice, their independent practice. They got their lesson plans laid out. But what you want to do in that 90 minutes may not necessarily be what kids capture in that 90 minutes. And it won't be. You're going to be interrupted. Things are going to happen. You're going to have the Dallas who is talking. So we start thinking about, and there's been data on this one, the average, if it's a 90-minute class, the average class literally is about 65 minutes. 72 if you want to stretch it out to the latest algorithm. Even then, you only see kids 72 minutes every other day. And kids have access to this already. So how do we provide them access to the information outside of the walls of our schools? And then, when they get into our walls, we use their time wisely. And we use our time wisely. I always tell people the most disrespectful thing we can do to anyone is waste their time. And as adults, we don't like our time being wasted. Why would we do that to someone else? Particularly someone else who's going to be taking care of us later on. Right? So think about that one. The other thing which I think is bothering me more so than anything else is that we've got to take care of our kids, though. And yes, educators, while we go to the content, we'll go to the what we teach and the how we teach it, the reality is Maslow's hierarchy of needs is real. We all know that. And if it's real, if we think about what our kids are telling us right now, 80% of our students are experiencing anxiety that will go untreated. The latest stat for an adult is 64%, which I think is a little low. But 80% of our students will have it and it not even go treated. 60% of our students are experiencing depression that won't go treat it. The latest stat for adults is over 75. And then lastly, 88% of educators believe the COVID crisis increased the need to address student mental health. 88% said that. So if we think about that one, 88% are saying that. Data will show that less than 40% of districts are doing anything about it. Because what districts want to do, and we always think we can do this, is we want to hire our way out of it. You can't find them. We can't find enough professionals to deal with the addressing the needs of our students. And so if we can't find them, when I work with our partner districts, I have to share with them, there are partners out there that do telehealth. There are, that do it really, really well. That it could be free for students. Not only free for students, it could be free for adults. The Affordable Care Act actually gave money back to systems to actually utilize employee assistance programs that will work on mental health. So there's a reason why we're not doing it, but the reality is if this is not addressed first, the content doesn't matter. And that's what I've seen as the biggest issue as schools open back up. When someone made the decision, look, we're opening, we thought we were going to flip a switch and things were going to go back to normal. And what we're seeing now is whether it's students fighting, whether we're seeing students be disruptful or disrespectful or disruptful in general, or whether we see educators who are just in many cases not happy with each other. Because I've been in schools, and I don't know if you're seeing this, but I've been in schools where educators are arguing with each other. With 2 years being isolated, this is not who we are as humans. If we were isolated for 2 years, we've got to get to the core the core issue of how do we work with people on addressing personal issues they may have and how they can get that addressed so they can better support our kids. We also have to make sure that we provide the support to our kids so at the end of the day, though, they're better people because they've learned coping skills and they've learned how to deal with when they're not feeling a great way or when they're dealing with a situation and they don't know how to get out of. That is our responsibility as adults. If we go back to this definition of schooling, when we start talking about the whole child, you can't talk about the whole child in the definition of schooling without taking care of the mental needs of the child. Same thing with our people. If you look at it in general, and Oracle did this, so I want to give them credit for this, 76% of workers believe their companies should be doing more. If you look at educators, there are about 84% say their school systems or their districts should be doing more. 78% say the pandemic has negatively affected their mental health. Again, these are adults. And then lastly, 85% say their mental health issues are causing sleep deprivation, poor physical health, and other factors. So if our people are thinking this way, and again, educators are higher in all three areas. Someone asked me, why do you think that's the case? Educators, we keep more problems on our sleeves than other industries. It's just what we do. If a kid tells you they can't stay, that their electricity is off at home, you cannot, as an educator, go home, sleep peacefully, knowing that you have a kid who does not have a basic necessity. It's just how it is. So when we think about this, we have to take care of our people at the same time we're taking care of our kids. Advocacy. Kids are coming back now. And what a principal told me the other day, he says, you know, my kids, right now, they really are. It's like they're amped up. They want to be involved. I'm like, well, that's a good thing, right? He said, I don't know. I'm like, dude, we got to talk. Because it is a good thing, but the reality is it has to be structured, but it can't be silenced. You can structure student and teacher advocacy without silencing either. As educators or as a leader, if someone wants to silence your voice, you can be kind of teed off. This is being recorded, so I'm not going to say any other word. But if you're going to be that way, why would we do this to young people who in the future will have to deal with bigger problems because we have created it for them? So with that, we got to have student voice in our schools. And if you think about whether it was the George Floyd protest that happened pre-COVID, because student advocacy was amping up prior to COVID. COVID sort of put a pause on it. But now you have kids coming back and they're seeing some of the same inequities they had before they left. And so with that, we got to make sure that student voice, but also is prevalent as we open schools back up. And the last thing, we got to deal with our physical space. And I remember over the course of my career, I've probably been involved in building well over 100 schools, creating well over probably 55 schools. Any type of school you can think of, pre-K-12, pre-K-16, name it. But been involved. But as educators, we like to think about the space first before anything else, which always floored me. As we open back up and we think about what is it our goal, what is it we're trying to do with young people, what is it we want them to accomplish, how do we want them to actually have their level of schooling? There are districts right now who are saying, we're going to have schools open from 8 in the morning to 8 at night, rotating shifts, right? There's so many different models that if we think outside of our box, we can get there. But the physical space of a school has to be rethought of because flexible spaces matter. And right now, when we look at our buildings, there is no flexible space. Classrooms are designed for the number of kids that need to go in there. We order furniture for the number of kids that need to go in there. The desks look the exact same for the number of kids who need to go in there. If kids need to have collaborative spaces, they're in floors outside of the classroom because there's no meeting space. We control all this. And at the end of the day, though, schooling does not have to exist within a school building. Because what we see is that as school districts renovate and they build new schools based on student population growth that was years ago, in the next 5 to 10 years, all of our data show us that student enrollment will begin to decline. And we're going to be forced with buildings and settle with buildings that we're not going to be able to do much with. Or we're going to have to look at them in a different way. On the front end, we could have made a better fiscal decision. And so I am encouraged. Again, I'm an optimist, so I'm encouraged about next steps, what's about to happen. We have, and I heard people talking about it earlier, AI is growing right now. Again, I think I shared with you one of my clients. I was on the phone with them earlier today, and they're doing some great work in terms of making sure that education is for young people. So I'm optimistic that we will bring this all together. What I want us to do, though, as our charge as we're here at this conference, is that we build a network with each other so that as those days get hard, because they're going to get hard, because they're already hard now, they're going to get harder, we start recognizing that much of the stuff that we want to do, we actually can do it if we just look at people who are doing it right next door to us. We don't have to reinvent the wheel for every single thing. We don't have to think of our schools being, monolithic things that just exist with one function. It can be multiple functions. We don't have to look at our dollars being spent over here and then another place over here when it in essence, serves the same purpose of educating by all being worked over here. So I am excited about brighter days ahead for us. Again, this is our information. I put all of ours up. I think we do have some time for questions. I'm excited about the work that we're doing with our partner districts and schools. I'm excited about the work that we're doing to support principals through the Principals Club. And I'm excited about meeting many of you. And so if there's anything that I can do to support the work that you're doing, let me know. I mean, I think I was just talking to our director of operations. We're at about 95 clients right now. Our team continues to grow. That's the excitement that happens because at the end of the day, if every single kid isn't getting the same education that you would want for your own kid, then we still have some more work to do. So it's exciting to be here with you this afternoon. Hopefully you have an opportunity to enjoy Vegas over the next couple of days, and I will answer any questions potentially that you may have. But thank you guys for the opportunity to be with you today. Perfect. So I'm going to turn it back over to, I think we have a panel coming up, and I'm going to be down if anyone has any questions or would like to talk to me. Thank you guys for the opportunity again to be here.